First off, hi, my name's CJ Gammon. I'm on the web platform team at Adobe, and our team works with the W3C to standardize new features in the browsers, and also works on a number of browser implementations, adding new features directly to browsers. So the title of this talk is Web plus Wow. We're going to go through the web, talk about it as a medium, and explore the various graphical features of the web and how we can create rich media experiences with those features, and then take a look at where some trends of the web and where this could be going in the future. So before I get started, I like to do a little bit of a disclaimer. How many of you use caniuse.com? Okay, so a good amount. So Caniuse is a great resource. It's actually a lot of browser compatibility tables, and it allows you to see which features are implemented in which versions of the browsers. I bring this up because we're going to be talking about a lot of newer or coming features that may not have wide implementations yet in the browsers. So it's always good to be responsible and make sure that the platforms you're targeting support the features that you're using. So what is a website? When we think about a website, we think of a lot of different things. It can involve marketing sites, articles, increasingly games and applications, but it's a lot more than the document model that it was originally intended to be. Ultimately, though, when we take all of these different uses for websites, we can break them out into two categories, and I call these semantics and graphics. So the semantics are the text and the markup that create meaning for us, but also for the systems they're used in, things like browsers, search engines, or screen readers. But we also have graphics, and I use this term to represent the more graphical and exuberant features that create a rich and engaging experience, but might not have semantic meaning necessarily. And this is the part that I'm really interested in and we're going to focus on today. Especially when I think of the web and what drew me to it, it was the immersive experiences that people were creating with the web. And these are often highly graphical, rich, game-like experiences, and not necessarily semantic. And I have an example of this. The internet will work for me. Cool. So this is a website from 2007, and this was actually created in Flash. But you can see how it's this rich, immersive experience. There's not a lot of semantic content going on, and I can actually explore it the way you would in any platform game. And it's got a lot of heavy textures, and I can just kind of play around with it. There's a lot of layering going on. So you can see how this is really cool, right? So today we have HTML5, and this is kind of an umbrella term for all the cool things we can do on the web today. We've got things like video, audio, canvas, and a lot of new APIs that we can leverage to make cool, engaging content. So I just kind of want to do an overview so we're all on the same page and walk through some of these graphical features we have available to us and how they can be used on the web today. So first up is CSS. Everyone should be familiar with CSS if you're doing any sort of web development. So we use CSS to style our content. We can do cool things like transitions. Everybody gets it. We also have SVG, which is scalable vector graphics. So this is the vector format for the web. And it allows us to do these interesting vector illustrations. And the cool thing about it is being vector, they're infinitely scalable, and they can be printed off at very high resolutions. We can also combine it with CSS to do interesting transitions and adjust the properties of it. So you can see here we're adjusting the fill and the stroke, and also scaling the lightning bolt. And we can continue to do this with other elements and animations. We can also leverage JavaScript libraries that allow us to manipulate our SVG content. So we can do interesting effects like this, where we can actually follow the mouse. And if you guys are really interested in SVG, you definitely want to check out the keynote tomorrow morning. There's going to be a big announcement by Adobe. I can't spill the beans on what it is, but definitely check it out. And also check out Dmitry Barnovsky's session on SVG. If you don't know who Dmitry is, he's awesome. He's the creator of Raphael.js, which is like one of the most popular SVG manipulation libraries. So you definitely don't want to miss that. 2D Canvas. So 2D Canvas is the canvas is 2D drawing context. It allows us to draw 2D shapes and images. And because it's a JavaScript API, it's really close to scripting, so we can do really interesting things like completely dynamic interactions. So every time I roll over this, we get a completely unique effect. We can also leverage larger JavaScript libraries, like incorporating physics engines, so we can do fluid, like dynamic fluid simulations. And we can also bring in other forms of media, like video. So here I can create this hover effect using video to make a really cool interactive button. We also have WebGL, and this is Canvas's 3D drawing context. So WebGL is a low-level JavaScript API that allows us to do 2D and 3D graphics. Because it has a 3D API, we can do full 3D geometry and animation. It also brings to the table shaders, which are programs that run on the GPU and allow us to do rich graphic effects. Like in this case, we can do lighting effects and shadows, or we can do other rich post-processing effects and other cool simulations, like this tie-dye effect we have here. This is just a shader running on the GPU that does this sort of animation. So now we're all experts in the language, the graphical language of the web, right? So let's see how we can apply these and use them to make rich web experiences. I've broken these out into 3 categories: effects, motion, and games. And so we'll go through each of these and explore how we can create these experiences on the web. First up is graphic effects. These are image manipulation techniques that you would typically use in tools like Photoshop or Lightroom and output static images. So when you're playing around with photos and changing them around. The first up is filters. So if you use Photoshop or Lightroom, you've probably played with the contrast, grayscale, or brightness of an image just to change the effect of it. And these are the kinds of effects we can actually change on our HTML content with CSS. So you can see here it's kind of going through a few of the filters we have available and adjusting the values of this image. The cool thing is, because it's in CSS, we can also transition between these properties and even combine them and stack them on top of each other. So watch here as I stack a bunch of them on top of each other. We can create a custom filter effect similar to the kinds of filters you would use in applications like Instagram. Cool. We also have masks. So these are often used in tools like Photoshop as well when you want to create a cool frame for your image. This is actually a photo of my daughter. And you can see how I have a mask image that I'm applying to it in the third picture there. And what it's doing is it's actually taking the alpha channel of that image and applying it to our content. And again, you can apply this to any HTML content. It doesn't have to just be images. And this is all done with CSS. So the syntax for CSS masking is actually really simple. It's identical to the background syntax, the CSS backgrounds. So you can apply an image. You can set its position, its sizing, and how it repeats. And this gives us a lot of control, right? We can transition those properties and animate them or create cool different effects. But I kind of want more out of my masking effects. I kind of want to be able to do something a little more like this, right? So this is a dynamic masking effect. And what I really want to be able to do is draw whatever I want and be able to use it as a mask. So you can actually, because we have 2D Canvas, we have a 2D drawing API. And we can actually draw our content dynamically. The question then becomes, how do we use that canvas element as a mask? Well, fortunately, there's a way to do it. Unfortunately, it's a non-standard approach. It's actually WebKit specific. But using JavaScript, we can create a canvas context using the getCSSCanvasContext method that's on the document. And what we do is then we pass in an ID and are able to reference that in CSS as a CSS image using the WebKit canvas method. So then we can use that as either a background image or, in this case, a mask to draw whatever we want to use as a mask. So let's kind of take a look at how we can actually apply this to our websites. We partnered with the Food Network, who has this awesome application they made full of cupcake recipes. And what we wanted to do was create this rich experience and bring their application to the web. But we wanted these transitions to be really engaging and cool. So we're actually using this technique. So if you watch here, as I click one of these buttons. We're actually going to, it's going to happen really quick, so I want you guys to watch, okay? Everybody paying attention? Okay. Watch. I'm going to click. Did you see it? Okay. You probably didn't see that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to slow it down for you now so you can actually see it happening. So, okay, here I go. Ready? Cool. Did you see that? Right. So what we're doing is we're actually using this canvas as a mask to transition between our content, which allows us to do whatever we want as a mask. The possibilities are really endless. So we could do gradients. We could do anything you could draw on a canvas and use it as a mask. And it actually animates and updates the image that you're using in CSS while you're doing it in JavaScript. So I think that's pretty cool. Next is motion graphics. So motion graphics are used a lot for visual interest. They often include things like video or just normal animation. And there is this band called OK Go who is known for doing these elaborately choreographed music videos that tend to go viral on YouTube. And they often have some sort of twist to them or some gimmick. And this is one of the videos they did a few years back called WTF. And you can see the gimmick here is they're actually recording themselves doing this choreography in front of green screen footage. So they're taking the green screen and using the alpha channel to continuously draw the opaque pixels on top of each other, giving it this echo effect, which is neat, especially with the choreography that they're doing. So they're doing a lot of things to kind of take advantage of this effect. So I was thinking about how we could actually achieve this effect on the web. And immediately I thought of 2D Canvas, because this is the default drawing mechanism for Canvas if we don't clear our context. So I went ahead and took the original green screen footage they had. You can see it in the upper left here. And I'm actually just drawing it onto a canvas to recreate this effect. But the ideal way you'd want to do this is with Alpha Video. And unfortunately, Alpha Video is only really supported in Chrome Canary. It might have landed in mainline Chrome, but I think it's still a little sketchy right now. So what I'm doing instead is I actually rendered out the footage with a mask. You can see it next to the original footage up there. And so in Canvas, I'm actually just throwing out these pixels that we don't need. And this recreates the same effect that we have in their music video. And the cool thing is, because it's in Canvas, we can actually play around with it and interact with it. So what I'm going to do now is apply Canvas blend modes and actually multiply this color so we can get this other sort of effect. We can even change the color to make it red and see how that affects it and play around with it. And then do other sorts of blending modes to see I don't know what that'll do. Let's see. So you can see how we can actually apply all these different effects and make it interactive for our users and make it a more immersive, engaging experience than just throwing out static video. So another popular thing in motion graphics is just animation or moving things around. And we can do this with SVG and JavaScript libraries and create really cool graphical animations using our vector content and just scaling them at any size and rotating them around. So this is something that I think is really interesting and has a lot of potential, especially for dynamic generative artwork. You could create some sort of animation sequence and then print it out at a really high resolution and have cool artwork to show all your friends. Another great thing we can do with SVG is interaction. So here is an illustration I put together in Adobe Illustrator. And you can see as I move around, I can actually interact with this content and play around with these little circles and characters fly out. So you can see how this has a lot of potential for really immersive sorts of interactions that we can apply to our web content, either for our user interface, for infographics, or data visualization. So another thing that's often used for motion graphics is 3D animation or post-processing effects. This is a cool motion graphics piece I found on Behance. And you can see how it has this 3D mesh that's sort of oscillating and animating these particles. And actually has a depth of field blur being applied to it. So if you see the particles in the background are actually blurrier than the foreground. So this is a really complex effect that involves a lot of processing. So how could we achieve this on the web? Well, we can actually do this kind of a thing with WebGL. So I created a similar experience where we have this mesh that's sort of oscillating, and it gets blurrier as it goes in the background. And we can actually play around with the camera and interact with it in real time because it's WebGL. And I can click and oscillate our little particles faster based on a click, just to make it a more playful experience. So we can take those kinds of video experiences that we're used to doing in other applications and bring it to the web in a more engaging and interactive way. So now I want to talk about video games, because the gaming industry has had a big influence on the web. And I think that's because a lot of the limitations and problems we have as web developers have kind of been faced before by the gaming industry. So specifically, when you think of the kinds of limitations, one of the things that gamers had to do in the early days is make really engaging experiences with very limited hardware capabilities. And that's very similar to what we deal with now with mobile devices and also with dealing with network bandwidth. So a good example of this is in the game Myst. So how many people actually played Myst growing up? Yeah. So this came out back in 1993. That was a long time ago, man. So when this first came out, and I first saw screenshots of it, I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Like it had all this depth and this fully explorable 3D world and textures, and it was just amazing. It was going to like change my life. So the way that they actually achieved this, though, if you remember the game, is they rendered out these static images. They had 2,500 static images that you used to navigate the game. And you navigated it like a slideshow. It was like moving through one slide at a time. And I think it goes to show how you can use the limitations of a platform in creative ways to kind of innovate the way your approach to things. And it actually was one of the best-selling games of all time, I think, like in 1993, which is crazy. So let's talk through some of the approaches from game development that have made their way to the web. So this is a sprite sheet. A sprite sheet consists of a single texture that contains all the frames of our animation. And what we can do is focus on a single frame of our animation, and then as we iterate through those frames, our character will begin to animate. So we're just repositioning the texture. And we get our little animation. We can also put him into this world by throwing a texture in the background, and then move him in space by simply offsetting the texture of the background in the opposite direction our character's moving. So now he's moving in space. But it still feels a little flat, right? Like we've got our guy and we've got this world, but that's really it. And layering and depth can add a lot of value to our experience. So what I'm going to do now is actually break up the background into several layers and offset their speed based on their position and their depth. So if you watch the background as it's moving, I'm going to break it up here, and you can see, hopefully, that the layers are moving at different speeds now. And this is parallax, and we've seen this used on the web a lot with scrolling sites, often tied to scroll events, so that you can get rich visual effects as you're scrolling through your content. So the question remains, is there more that we can do, more inspiration we can get from video games that we can apply to web development? And I think there is. So we've come a long ways since the days of Myst. Now we have games like Grand Theft Auto 5, where we have these fully immersive 3D worlds that we can explore. And WebGL makes this kind of stuff possible on the web. So just to kind of do a little demo of WebGL, I put together this demo of, anyone ever play Ski Free? Okay, yeah. I used to play this game a lot as a kid. He always gets you, man. So this is my rendition of Ski Free. I'm using an orthographic camera here, so it looks a little flat, but because it's 3D, we can actually change the perspective and do, man, okay. and make it a more 3D experience. And we can also change the position of the camera so that we get a first-person experience as well. So this is just a simple example of the kind of content we can create with WebGL. But while games and demos are great, what can this mean for the larger web and your websites in general? How can we apply these kinds of features to our websites? Well, we were talking about parallax effects, and if you think of the ways that people often achieve these, they're typically animating DOM elements around. You're scrolling through the website, and you've got a lot of re-layout going on, a lot of re-rendering of your content that's all happening in the DOM. And this can be kind of taxing on your website and its performance. But what we can actually do is leverage WebGL and throw all that animation content into the background layer. So if you see here, I've actually got this 3D scene, and I've got my DOM content laying on top of it. And so what I can do is actually scroll down, and you see how the camera actually moves with it? So we can actually recreate these sort of parallax effects, leveraging the canvas and WebGL, and have these rich sort of visual transitions and animations going on, all leveraging the canvas while keeping our DOM content semantic and in a layer on top of it. So just to clarify how this is working, we have our window, and then we have our normal DOM content underneath it that we can scroll through normally. And we also have our canvas element that's a fixed canvas, and it's the size of the entire screen. And what this does is it allows us to clearly separate our semantic and our graphical content. So we can throw all our graphical content into our canvas and use our semantic content and markup as we normally would. And this allows us to do cool effects like this. You see how we can actually animate in space and keep on using 3D transforms. It doesn't have to just be vertical, right? We can move in any direction we want to. And using a camera that we tie and associate it with our content, we can keep these things consistent. We can have a single object that represents both our camera for our DOM content and also our WebGL content. So all this stuff is pretty cool, but ultimately what the web comes down to is communication. All of the text and images, media that we put on it are really intended for us to share ideas and experiences with other people. So there are a lot of new features making their way to the web that are going to enhance the way that we can communicate online. And one of those is WebRTC. So WebRTC stands for Web Real-Time Communication. It allows us to do things like video and audio chat online. So I put together a little demo that I'm going to try out now, hesitantly. This may not work. No promises. Let's just see. We'll have fun. Let's try it. So this is actually sort of a MechWarrior game that I remade using WebGL and WebRTC. Is this going to work? Cool. OK. Alexis, can you raise your hand? OK. This is Alexis. So I can actually explore this game and play it and like shoot him and stuff. So this kind of shows how we can leverage all these technologies and integrate things like WebGL, WebRTC, and all these other technologies to create really cool immersive experiences online. And I think there's a lot of potential here for, OK, that's enough. There's a lot of potential here for WebRTC on the web, not only in gaming, but in larger application contexts as well, in ways you can interact in real time online. So what does all of this mean for the future of the web? I think the future of the web is going to be increasingly intense and interesting and exciting. I think there are a lot of new features making their way to the web that are going to just keep pushing the boundaries of what we thought possible. And I'm really kind of excited to see where everything is going. We have a team at Adobe that's really passionate about adding useful and meaningful features to the web. So if you guys are interested in this stuff, we actually have a booth out there. You can come talk to us. I'll be hanging out there later if you want to chat. And if you want to learn more about the kind of stuff we're doing, check out html.adobe.com. And that is it for me. That was... Oh, and that's if you're into Twitter, that's me. So I guess we have time for questions. If you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them.
Can you share the slideshow?
Yeah, so I'll be posting. So I don't have it online yet, but I'll be posting. If you want to, I'll tweet it once I get the slides ready for public consumption. Anyone else? No? Yeah.
Will you do one of these demos for us next year in England?
Sure thing. No problem. Cool. Okay, well, I'll be hanging out, and like I said, we'll be at the booth, so if you guys want to come chat, I'd love to talk. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.